in with different attitudes today than 5 years ago or 5 years from now. I think we need more data.
Okay, great. Let me ask a question, yet another from the audience here, that I think brings a lot of these issues into focus. Because one thing that Mr. Tyner has said is that universities are concerned, and rightly so, about protecting underrepresented minorities and others who may come into an environment and feel hostility. And they may even view the entire debate about free speech to be something hostile to members of underrepresented minority groups. There may be members of those groups who think that all the talk about free speech is just to justify speech that's critical of them and not critical of the majority. So with that framing in mind, let me ask this question. It's really two hypotheticals, and I'm going to start with you, Robert, and see what you think on this. Was it appropriate for Oklahoma President David Boren to expel fraternity members for singing a racist song?
No.
All righty. What, if any, circumstances should permit a college to discipline a student who calls another student, an African-American student, by the N-word?
Well, that's a little bit more complicated question. With regard to President Boren's decision to, I believe, not just disband the fraternity, kick everybody out of their fraternity house within, I believe 48 hours. They had the letters down, all because several people were filmed on a bus, not everybody on the bus, on this fraternity party bus of some kind, singing what was acknowledgedly an extremely sort of hair-raisingly racist song. That was such a clear example of guilt by association, and not only is that protected speech. Racist songs are protected speech. They wasn't aimed at somebody there. That just simply doesn't rise to the level of unprotected speech. And University of Oklahoma is a public university, so he was not justified in doing that. And Fire condemned that very loudly when it happened. I can only imagine how I would feel. There were two buses. There were people on another bus. I can only imagine how I'd feel if I was one of the people on the other bus and was thrown out of my home and kicked out of my school for people on the other bus singing a song that I may not even have known about. So no, when it comes to when simply using the words becomes something for which you could move to discipline, it has to rise to the standard of discriminatory harassment under the Supreme Court's decision in Davis from 1999. And so simply using a word one time or even several times is not going to be enough. It needs to be a pattern of harassing behavior. Generally a pattern. If it's very, very severe one time, it could be a one-time thing like a sexual assault. But it has to be a pattern of harassing behavior that's so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively keeps the victim, a student, from getting their education at that school. I'm eliding a little bit there, but it's a high standard because the reason when it's peer-on-peer stuff, which I believe is what you're talking about here, it'd be one thing if it was a professor or administrator saying that. Then you've got other issues there of just employee discipline. In that case, if they're calling people that. Students aren't in a position generally of having power over one another. A lot of what makes harassment discriminatory is the power relationship of one person over the other. And so if a student calls me a bad name, if they call me, whether or not it has to do with my race or with my political beliefs, which, frankly, people are called bad names because of their political beliefs all the time now, that in itself doesn't rise to the level of harassment. So I would say that if it raises to that standard and the university would have to investigate that and establish that, then yes, they could be punished. But just simply uttering the word, we had a case where a professor at Brandeis was explaining the use of the term wetback, and because somebody asked him about it in class. And he was disciplined by the university. This is a professor who had been there for about 50 years. Ended up I believe he just ended up having to retire through the whole mess just to sort of make it go away. So you can't let the tripwire for it just be that low a level.
Professor Volek, what do you think on this question, and how have you maybe seen this play out in your experience?
Sure. There's a reason that historically people on the left, but people all over, have worried about the slippery slope. I have to warn you, I wrote a 100-page long, literally, I'm sorry to say, Harvard Law Review article 15 years ago, so I'm going to try to condense it a little bit. But the bottom line is that once a particular kind of legal rule is accepted, there are going to be consequences from it outside of the original situation. There are lots of mechanisms through which this happens, but we see that. Just to give an example from a different area that I think many of you might have thought about elsewhere, but it's precisely because it's different. It's a different kind of debate, is privacy. That one particular form of surveillance may be very modest, but it's used as a precedent for other forms of surveillance, and then still others. I do think we have less privacy now than before, maybe for good reason. Maybe dangers require surrender of that. But I think if you look at the history of surveillance and restrictions on privacy from, say, the 60s to the present, we see some of that slippery slope. The same thing happens with regard to university speech, university student speech. That once you accept the proposition that somebody, even for off-campus speech, talking to friends, can be expelled because he uses a racist slur. You know, maybe you could say, well, it'll only be limited to racist slurs, but why should we think that? Why wouldn't we infer that what's going to happen is other people will say, well, wait a minute, he used an anti-Semitic slur, anti-gay slur. Isn't that the same? Aren't we entitled to the same protection? Yes, say the universities. Well, he didn't exactly use the slur. He didn't call me a kike. He called me a Zionist pig, or he didn't even call me. He complained, because this did not involve any targeted thing, Zionist pigs. Well, lots of Jews understandably view that as code word for kike or for something along those lines, kind of the modern version. And then, and then you get something like the Office for Civil Rights statements that, well, if you harshly condemn Israel, then that's certainly many Jews perceive that as an attack, especially in light of what they see as many physical violent attacks on Jews in Israel and elsewhere, thankfully very few in America. So this is the way things happen in a legal system built on analogy and precedent. Tempting as it is to say, well, these are different, these are communists, these are Nazis, they're different, we're going to have a separate rule for them and it's not going to spread. It's hard to keep it from spreading. That's why I think even really nasty speech needs to continue to be protected. Especially, not only, but especially, again, once we get to a point where off-campus speech, it could have just as well been at a party. It could have just as well been over dinner if somebody had recorded it or overheard it. Once you get to the point where people can be expelled from the university for that, then the door is wide open, to mix a metaphor.
Yeah, if I can just add, I ask progressives, do you trust Donald Trump to define hate speech and apply the sanctions on you? I assume the answer is no. So do not assume that you are always going to be in power, which you are now certainly on the university campuses, to be able to control that extraordinary principle, to be able to silence your enemies. Because believe me, Donald Trump would love to use it.
Lee Tyner, I'd like to ask you, building on this hypothetical, do you think that use of the N-word or some of the other words that we've heard up here would qualify as hate speech?
So Robert and I generally agree with what the law says about this. And hate speech is not a useful term at all in trying to determine what's actionable under the law. So it could be clearly hate speech, but it's still protected. Okay, so let's be clear. Hate speech is not useful as a term of art in trying to determine what's actionable or protected speech and what is not. All right? But the question is whether or not the N-word can be used to create a hostile environment. Sure, it can be used to create a hostile environment, depending upon the circumstances and whether it's unavoidable for the student, it's a condition of what they have to endure to go to class or to go to their bedroom at night. It depends upon the circumstances and whether it's directed at a person or an individual and what's the context. One of the challenges we face, I'll allude to this in my remarks, is the legal standard for when a university has to pay the victim of discrimination for having failed to cure the discrimination is whether or not they've acted with reckless disregard, with deliberate indifference towards harassing conduct that is so severe, pervasive, or objectively You get the turn of phrase right.
Severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive.
And objectively offensive as to effectively deny a student educational programs or benefits, basically. So that's the standard, right? If we don't cure harassing conduct before it creates a hostile, that we know about, before it creates a hostile environment, we owe the student, we are liable to the student for having failed to cure the harassment. But, at least many suggest, if we have to sit and watch the N-word be used multiple times until it's actually created the hostile environment before we can punish it. That can't be right? There has to be some room where the university can walk, where it's neither liable to the speaker nor the victim. There's got to be some space there somewhere. Now, that having been said, the abstract promotion of awful ideas and use of racial slurs in the abstract context of promoting ideas we disagree with does not create a hostile environment under the law. I think Robert and I would agree with both where the tension is and what the law is with respect to that.
Okay. Well, we have just 2 minutes remaining. I'd like to give each of our panelists about 30 seconds for any closing thoughts you might have, starting with you, Professor Volokh.
I just want to stress one thing that I mentioned before. Free speech has many functions, but one of the most important ones at the university is that it gives us confidence in what is accepted received wisdom. That's true on history, it's true on science, it's true on everything else. Now, the real scholars will tell you we should never have real confidence. Everything should always be up for grabs, and I totally agree with that. But as a practical matter, we as outsiders to a field need to be able to hear, here's some question about whether there are biological cognitive differences and temperamental differences among the sexes. Well, are there or aren't there? Or if there are, what's the magnitude? We can, as outsiders, we need to be able to have sources we turn to. And if we see that there is a conventional wisdom among scholars in a good sense, then we could say, okay, fine, we'll defer to that judgment. But not if we know that there hasn't been free speech both in the university, both among the faculty and among students and among graduate students and everybody else who can say, well, wait, maybe that's not quite right. So long as that process of free speech continues, that is when we can actually have confidence that there are some things that are right, and we can actually measure some of the other speech against it and say, well, this is speech that's false, so we should say it's probably false. Once there is that kind of suppression, it doesn't just undermine speech, it undermines our ability to trust the outputs of the academic enterprise, and that is very dangerous. Ms. McDonald.
Again, I do not think that we are living through an epidemic of racist acts on campus. We've heard the example of the N-word used on the fraternity bus, but I haven't heard any other examples of that. But I would also say more broadly that we have two choices. We can live in a world where we resolve our differences through reason, through rhetoric, through efforts at persuasion, or we have a world where force is used. There's really no middle ground. Whether that force is implicit in both an informal censorship of disfavored ideas, formal censorship, or, as we've seen in the last several years, the use of literal violence to try and shut down speech. That's our alternative. So I think that we need to be completely unequivocal in the idea that anything short of threats of physical violence, those disagreements have to be resolved through other ideas that challenge them. We cannot lose our confidence in the power of reason, in the Enlightenment values that have given us so much prosperity, freedom, and progress. And so to go down the road of carving out exceptions for hate speech, I think, is very dangerous. Again, though, let me reaffirm, what really colleges are about is the transmission of knowledge, and these things that we're talking about here are on the surface and what they are about is the passing on of an inheritance.
Mr. Shibley.
There's a man we had speak at a conference for Fire last year. His name is Daryl Davis, and he is a African American musician. And his, I guess maybe you'd call it a hobby, is befriending members of the Ku Klux Klan. He goes to Klan rallies, he befriends members, and he tries to relate with them as a person. And so far, he has convinced dozens of them to leave the Klan. They give, in fact, they give him his robe. He has a whole collection of KKK robes from people who are quitting. The reason I bring this person up and the reason we brought him to Fire is because the key to trying to deal with this bad speech, and I think there's because campuses are a more diverse place and they are a place that there's much more ferment right now than maybe there was in past years, although certainly not from the 1960s, is because we've given up, it seems on persuading instead of coercing. There seems to be this sort of intellectual virus that's gotten in, this idea that if nobody ever hears something bad, if they don't hear that somebody doesn't like black people, if they don't hear anti-Semitism, that it wouldn't occur to them normally. And what I would suggest is that, I don't know whether or not that's true or not, but I do know that persuading somebody to change their mind is going to be a lot more effective than trying to make sure that they're never exposed to that topic. And so I think to the extent that universities and other cultural institutions are currently making this effort to make it so that we're not persuading you, we're not letting other people persuade, but we're going to actually, ban your speech if you step over the line. That's been a huge mistake.
And Mr. Tyner.
Well, I'd say a couple things. One is we need to encourage universities and faculty members to don't grow weary of doing good. I mean, and by that I mean they have new students every year who come from environments where they've not confronted ideas that they're uncomfortable with, where they've not been required to, and they don't have an appreciation necessarily of our civic institutions or the values that are important to the maintenance of our civic institutions. And that's one of the key roles of universities. And again, I think the data shows that universities actually move the needle in a favorable way on those key things, and that college graduates have more favorable views towards free expression and value those ideals more than the rest of our society. So we can't grow weary of that notion, and we can't act like the fact that new 18-year-olds come next year who are not fully formed, and some who hold racist views, and some who don't value the First Amendment. The fact that that's true, we can't let that discourage us or somehow make us think that we're failing. That's one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is the same thing I say when I'm speaking to campus professionals or student life professionals at other conferences or on my own campuses. Many of the most sublime days on a campus that I've seen in my career have been when hateful, offensive speakers come to our campus. And it's because our students think and our students engage and they struggle with what it means, and they learn about free expression, and they learn about and they begin to have more meaningful conversations than they otherwise would have that day on campus. So I've always viewed it as something of a great day when we successfully have speakers that are very controversial, because it inevitably leads to advancement in the citizen scholars on our campus and how they think and engage with the world. So I try to encourage campuses not to fear offensive speakers coming to campus, but to take advantage of when they come.
Please join me in thanking John and our panelists for that outstanding discussion. Thank you very much. For students watching at home, that is how you can have a civil debate about differing ideas. That is a good way to do it. We now break for lunch, reconvening promptly at 1:15 for our panel discussion entitled The Path Forward. If you would like to remain on the DOJ premises, we invite you to enjoy the department's cafeteria located on the basement level. If you leave the building for lunch, the entrance you used this morning will be open again starting at 12:45 p.m. and again will be...
Again, that was a look at the Department of Justice Forum on Free Speech in Higher Education. That is at the Great Hall in the Department of Justice. Thank you again for listening to News Now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Carrie McGuire. The last report we heard was that Florence claimed the lives of at least 19 people as swollen rivers near record levels. Good day. Philadelphia checked in with Fox reporter Lauren Blanchard this morning, who was live in Wilmington, Delaware, and that clip is right here.
Well, we now know that by Hurricane Florence, there are widespread power outages and also devastating floods, and they're expecting the floodwaters to keep rising. So Lauren Blanchard is in the thick of it all, and we've been following this since before Hurricane Florence touched down, and now we're seeing the aftermath. Lauren, how's it for you there now?
Well, Alex, Karen, we are getting a bit of relief from the rain, at least this morning. But let me show you kind of what this town of Wilmington is dealing with now. This is a little sampling of what the debris looks like in the downtown area. Businesses all in here, all boarded up. While we got a little relief from the rain today, it is expected to continue to rain. Those rivers are expected to rise. Plus, we're also getting warnings for tornadoes and other areas suffering from Florence. They are looking at the possibility of landslides. Let me show you a good indicator that, believe it or not, FEMA actually uses as a way to judge how a city is doing. This behind me here is a Waffle House. When the Waffle House closes, FEMA takes that as an indicator that a community is not doing well. If they can't even run on generator power, if they can't have a limited menu, if the Waffle House closes, that tells FEMA the community needs help. But guys, at this point, Wilmington, most of the roads, or last we heard, all of the roads leading in and out of Wilmington all flooded, which means they can't get supplies in, they can't get people out. So a little bit of a hairy situation down here.
What's that like? I mean, if you're completely cut off, I mean, obviously people were told to evacuate, but it looks like you guys don't have power and you're cut off right now.
Right. Yeah, so it's a little bit worrisome, of course, when it comes to food and water. There was a concern that we may even lose water at one point, but they were able to get some fuel down to that area where they were getting the water to this area, this town. We have seen a little bit of the power come back on, but not much. The hope is today, if some of those floodwaters go down enough on some of those highways, that people will be able to move in and out, that, they'll be able to bring supplies in. But until those floodwaters recede just enough, it's not safe for people to be on the roads or trying to travel on those highways.
Yeah, have you seen any reports of looting at all? Because I heard some.
Yeah, Wilmington has been dealing with that. They actually put in effect an even earlier curfew last night. We were just actually able to get out of our hotel maybe an hour ago because that's when the curfew lifted. There were reports of looting, so police have been trying to identify other people who they captured on video looting. They've already charged or arrested and are planning to charge 5 people with looting, so police taking it very, very seriously here.
Well, Lauren, you've been doing great work. I mean, just thank you for everything in the thick of it. We were following you the whole time during the hurricane and through all of this. So thank you for getting out and about.
Yes, we appreciate it. We'll keep checking back in with you.
And on to another clip from this morning. The question to ask is, will Brett Kavanaugh's nomination for the Supreme Court survive allegations of sexual assault? Good Day spoke with Doug Luzader in Washington, D.C.
President Trump, his pick for the Supreme Court could be in real jeopardy this morning. A woman has come forward accusing Judge Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct.
Now, these allegations come from 30 years ago, but they could have some real consequences on Capitol Hill. Let's get down to Washington and Doug Luzader. Doug.
Good morning. Yeah, they're not anonymous anymore, and that may make a big difference here, in large part because the numbers in the Senate are just so tight right now, and this could throw everything up in the air. What does the White House do now? The Trump administration is still standing behind Judge Brett Kavanaugh, but support for a quick confirmation on Capitol Hill is eroding.
So I suspect as we talk right now, the phones are ringing off the hook between the Senate and the White House as they decide what strategy they're going to pursue against these allegations.
An anonymous allegation against Kavanaugh now has a name attached to it. Christine Blasey Ford says that back in high school, Kavanaugh assaulted her. And telling the Washington Post, "I thought he might inadvertently kill me. He was trying to attack me and remove my clothing." A Democratic Senator, Dianne Feinstein, knew about the allegation back in July, but didn't publicly acknowledge it until late last week, after Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings.
I have been embarrassed by the whole process. They've had this stuff for 3 months. If they were serious about it, they should have told us about it.
Kavanaugh has denied the allegations, and last week, 65 women who knew him in high school signed a letter backing him and defending his character. But Democrats want this week's committee vote on Kavanaugh delayed, and at least 2 Republicans are suggesting they agree. And 2 senators to watch, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, moderate Republicans who are still on the fence here. And one of the big questions now is whether Blasey Ford is actually going to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Right now, the vote on Kavanaugh is expected to take place on Thursday, and it's possible that could now be delayed. Alex and Karen.
Okay, I guess we'll have to see how it plays out then and what else comes out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Doug.
Amazon is under the radar and Tesla is under pressure. Fox Business Network's Hillary Vaughn has more in today's Morning Business Outlook.
Tech stocks driving gains to make up for investor concerns over tariffs. The Dow adding 8 points at the close Friday, ending at 26,154. The Nasdaq falling just 3 points, closing at 8,010. And the S&P 500 up just 0.8%, closing at 2904. Tesla finally hitting its stride with production, but that's caused Tesla CEO Elon Musk another headache, delivering all the cars. Musk says they've gone from production hell to, quote, delivery hell, but is confident this problem will be a lot easier to tackle. As Tesla tries to crack profitability for the first time, Elon Musk's other company, SpaceX, has chosen their man or woman for their first private moon flight. The company says they'll announce the name and reason the person was picked at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California later today. Amazon says they're investigating employees for taking bribes from companies who want negative reviews deleted. Most of this is happening in China, where reportedly some employees have been paid under the table $80,000 to $2,000 to get internal sales metrics, reviewers' email addresses, even deleting negative reviews or restoring accounts that have been banned. That's business. For more, log on to foxbusiness.com. In Los Angeles, I'm Hillary Vaughn.
Television's Best offers an eclectic mix of talent and shows spanning a wide spectrum of platforms. Michelle Polino gives us a preview of tonight's Emmy Awards.
Very excited to be hosting the 2018 Emmy Awards.
Saturday Night Live's Michael Che and Colin Jost hosting Monday's 70th Annual Primetime Emmy Awards, celebrating the best in television, which has been expanding to an even bigger TV landscape. Streaming giant Netflix leads all networks with 112 nominations, and HBO's Game of Thrones tops shows with 22, including one for Best Drama Series.
I was born to rule the Seven Kingdoms.
It's up against Westworld, Stranger Things, The Handmaid's Tale, This Is Us, The Crown, and The Americans.
This comedy thing, it has to work.
In the comedy category, critics have The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel as the show to beat, but Atlanta, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Barry, Silicon Valley, Blackish, Glow, and Curb Your Enthusiasm all have something to say about that.
What are you wearing?
Louis Anderson, who received his third consecutive supporting actor nomination for Baskets, says he relishes where TV is headed.
There's never been so many platforms, there's never been so many actors working, there's never been so many deals made, and there's never been so much art produced, ever.
And as Saturday Night Live adds another 21 nominations to its record 252 nods and 64 wins, creator Lorne Michaels reveels his secret to success.
If you love the game and you play it hard, I think you just keep going and it's what you do.
I might look adorable, but I'm frightening.
In Hollywood, Michelle Polino, Fox News.
Several children were hurt Sunday when a camel went wild at the Shrine Circus. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette says 2 children and an adult were riding the camel when it was spooked. You can see someone holding onto the beast as it bolts through a crowd of people. Handlers chasing after it in this dramatic scene. A child with a broken arm along with 5 other kids and 1 adult were hospitalized. Circus officials did not immediately know what startled the camel. Eventually, the situation was controlled and the circus resumed for its final day. Philly prides itself on food. Ask any Philadelphian and they'll give you a whole list of must-try food throughout the city. This morning, Good Day sat with Charles McGrath, the managing director of MRP Realty. He told us about the newest food hall coming to Philadelphia.
Well, we all know that Philadelphia is home to plenty of great restaurants, right?
All right, so first I would think about Rittenhouse Square and all those great restaurants that are all align it. You know, you can see all the people sitting out there enjoying.
In the park. Then there's also Reading Terminal Market, which is one of the country's largest and oldest public markets, and you can really get any and everything there. I like to take my family there because we don't have to argue about what we're going to eat. It's everything in one spot, and we can all just come together. Well, in just a few weeks, we'll be able to add the Boris Food Hall to that list because they were open, but now they've had some renovations, and there's slowly going to be opening soon. Bob, you're getting a preview?
We're getting a preview, a little bit of everything. Anyone who's been down to Old City, you know the name, the Borscht, directly across from the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall. Getting a makeover with some of the best food and beverage spots in this town. First up in the door, we need some coffee. Hi, what's your name?
Hey, my name's April.
And the name of the place?
This is Menagerie Coffee.
And it's all made-to-order coffee?
It's all made-to-order specialty coffee. So we work with one local roaster, Elixir Coffee, and we also work with Dogwood Coffee. They do our roasting for us, and then we make everything here.
Cool. Boom. They're the anchor as soon as you walk in the door. Now, Mike Cassidy, come on and let's walk and talk because I remember this building. How old is it, first of all?
It's a 125-year-old building, was built in 1895, and it was the first commodities exchange in the United States.
Now, there's still folks operating out of the upper floors.
So
right?
it's a 270,000 square foot building, which also has office space everywhere above this floor.
Whoa. So I remember here before, you just had the little kiosk, but you've actually done a whole makeover. How many restaurants altogether?
29 total restaurants on every type of food that you would imagine you would like. Place to go. This is Joe. He's ready to open today.
Hey, my man, what's your first name?
Joe, DeAndre.
And the name of your place?
This is called Bronze Table.
What do you have here?
Yeah, so this is ricotta and gnocchi with a pesto genovese.
What?
Ricotta and gnocchi with a pesto genovese. And this is Sunday gravy. This is our specialty. It's rigatoni with meatballs.
It's not sauce.
It's gravy.
It's gravy.
That's right.
Okay,
Come on
this
now.
is the second spot. And down here, probably one of the funnest names I've seen in a while.
Barry's Buns.
Not Bob's Buns, Barry's Buns. Come here, I want to see Barry's Buns. Barry!
How you doing?
How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good, good. So tell me what you're going to specialize in.
So we specialize in gourmet sticky buns, cinnamon rolls, crumb cake, everything all natural, no artificial flavors, colors. This is our large cinnamon roll. Our seasonal flavor is a pumpkin pie sticky bun. And that's
Hold on, pumpkin pie sticky bun. Breaking news.
How's that?
Delicious.
Awesome.
This is going to be one of my stops.
You can't go wrong with the pumpkin pie sticky bun.
Come on around the other side. What else do we have over here?
So we have Taquerian over here. It's a Korean taco house out of D.C., and this is his first foray into the Philadelphia area.
Are you welcome to Philly?
Welcome to Taquerian.
Tell me a little bit about what you have.
Hey, Mike. We've got tacos and salad bowls. We also do rice bowls. Today we've got pork tacos with kimchi slaw, a kale slaw with our roast pork was roast overnight tonight. and then vegetarian tacos, green beans and mushrooms, all Korean, Mexican spices fused together. Lots of different options for everybody.
So you can come in here, I get my coffee, I get my sticky buns, I got my pasta, I got my tacos.
Right now, you can start at 8 o'clock in the morning and stay here till 4 in the afternoon and do nothing but eat and drink. So it's a great
when will the whole place be ready to go?
November 15th is our grand opening, but we're letting the vendors open up as they're ready to go.
So you can have alcohol in here as well?
There will be an alcohol. We do have a liquor license, yes.
This is great. So you're right across the street, again, from Independence Hall, between 4th and 5th, Market and Chestnut. You know the name, the Bourse. When you're in town, this has to be one of your spots. I'm going to go get some of those pumpkin sticky buns.
Absolutely. They're
sticky buns for everybody! Come on, let's go! Come on!
It looks amazing in there. What a great, it's restoring it to its former grandeur.
I love it. I love it. And I also love, too, that they're letting them open as they, are ready, so that we don't have to wait till November. We can go ahead and start eating in there now.
We got our soft opening happening. All right.
We also love that it's right next to our station, so that also is great.
And this just in from the Eagles press conference with Doug Peterson. Carson Wentz has been medically cleared and will start Sunday. Again, Carson Wentz is set to start for Sunday's game. I'm sure a lot of fans are thrilled. And more local news, Fox reporter Steve Keeley was at Garnet Valley Middle School today, where a pickup truck went on a joyride around the grounds of Garnet Valley last night around 3 a.m. Here is a look at the scene this morning.
It makes everybody frustrated.
Look at all this damage to the grounds of the Garnet Valley School District. Around the elementary and middle school sign at the entrance. It's around the tree outside classroom windows. It's around the athletic fields. And what saved the sports fields from ruin this time is that this is the second time in a year someone's done this. Last fall, 2 were arrested for wrecking the fields so bad that the kids couldn't play on them all year. The district's taxpayers not only got stuck with the cost of resodding and planting the grass and dirt, but the $12,000 it cost to install these wooden guardrails all around the lengths of the fields to prevent them from being driven on again. They worked this time. But now the district has to wrestle with the question of putting the same kind of barricades around all the grounds.
We put up the cameras and the fencing. At least we've maintained that field space, but now we have this.
Pennsylvania State Police so far have had only this initial surveillance picture to put out to the public. Grainy, dark, black and white, but it does show it was a dark pickup truck that did this. Neighbor Robert Dudley's surveillance system right across the street captured the truck's headlights as they went round and around overnight Saturday into Sunday at 3 a.m. Already burdened taxpayers may wonder if they're now going to have to come up with the cost of better surveillance to get clearer color video and security guards at night and on weekends. The first culprits were ordered to pay restitution for all their damage. But the other cost here is trying to explain to little kids who all saw this here again on their way into class today and ask, who hates us? Why did someone do this to my school?
Especially the little ones. I mean, there's a sense of betrayal. There's a sense of fear. Like, why would somebody try to hurt our school? So you really have to talk to them to make them feel safe, let them know that one individual doesn't paint a picture for what we're about as a community.
Garnet Valley is the fastest growing school district in all of Pennsylvania. And authorities here wonder if there's resentment of that and all the cost and growing pains that come with it. Resentment carried out possibly with a dark pickup truck in the middle of the night on a weekend. The stuff cowardly vandals pull, and the kind of stuff that gets angry residents to call in tips about. In Delaware County, Steve Keeley, Fox 29 News.
Now over to North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, who is giving a press conference in North Carolina.
To the members of the media, I want to thank you for the work that you are doing in getting critical information out to people. We appreciate that. Please continue this message. We've been preparing for and living through Hurricane Florence for more than a week now. But this remains a significant disaster that affects much of our state. The next few days will be long ones as the flooding continues. Our emergency management experts and thousands of rescue and recovery personnel are on the job. This is what we prepared for. And we have new supplies and personnel coming in every hour. We, the people of North Carolina, will get through this. If you have an emergency, dial 911. For other help or resources or information that you might need, dial 211, or for the deaf and hard of hearing, 888-892-1162 for those using video relay services. And I'm thankful for Monica McGee providing American Sign Language as interpretation. I'll now recognize Mike Sprayberry.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Mike Sprayberry, the Director of the North Carolina Division of Emergency Management. Good afternoon. The State Emergency Operations Center remains activated at a Level 1 on Day 8 of the Hurricane Florence response. I want to thank all of our federal, state, private sector, and volunteer partners, but I want to especially thank our local partners at the county and municipality level. We know that you have borne the brunt of the Hurricane Florence response, and you're still right there in it at this moment. So thank you so much. Here at the state, we continue to be engaged in large-scale search and rescue operations, and we continue to push out resources like commodities, generators, firefighters, law enforcement, North Carolina National Guard, Highway Patrol to our county partners as requested. There are over 1,200 first responders performing wide area searches with 233 boats throughout the state. There's also major aviation search and rescue operations being conducted, as well as general support aviation operations to bring in supplies for places that are cut off by water. We're also currently working with our outstanding volunteer partners from the American Red Cross, the North Carolina Baptist Men and Women, and the Salvation Army to set up mass feeding kitchens. We expect to be serving hot meals today. Shelters also remain a top priority, as you heard the governor say, and we are engaged in mass sheltering operations with approximately 14,000 occupants. We're also working with our federal partners to make sure we've got good temporary housing solutions once we move folks out of shelters and we find that we have a need for it. As a reminder, it's important to note that all 911 centers are operational. When you call, you may be answered from a 911 center in another county, but responders will be dispatched from your county as normal. This is how the 911 backup system works. As you know, significant flooding is occurring and will continue to impact in the coming days. That's important to remember. Even when you see the sun out, rivers are still cresting. We urge all of our residents to log in to our flood inundation mapping and alert network, known as FIMAN, at FIMAN@nc.gov. Again, that's FIMAN.nc.gov to see which roads and structures will be affected by flooding. Users can sign up to be alerted in this system by text or email when rivers begin to rise. As always, please make sure you follow the guidance of your local officials. That's so important. And stay tuned to your local media to ensure situational awareness. Thank you so much for your support of the North Carolina State Emergency Response Team. Thank you very much, Governor.
Secretary Jim Trogdon.
Thank you, Governor. Jim Trogdon, Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Transportation. As of today, we have 356 primary roads closed across the state, and that number is up from yesterday's 180. Total roads, and we're seeing some positive movement, total roads overnight was 1,700. That's down now to 1,197, but that also includes secondary roads across the state. So we're seeing some gradual improvement in the condition of roadways. Mobility and access. Yesterday's focus was getting good access into Wilmington. We successfully did that. We have one major route that's supporting us, and we're working on the same thing to ensure we have good access into Brunswick County. Brunswick County's access has been up and down due to the flooding conditions and the dynamics of the flooding conditions. We are making great progress, especially in Craven, Carteret, Jones, up in that area of the center of the eastern North Carolina, in clearing debris from the roadways. We're making sure that mobility on the roadways, now that the floodwaters are down, will not be constrained by fallen trees. So the counties up there are reporting good progress in clearing trees out of the roadways. We're at 90% of all of our roads cleared in that county area. In Wilmington, New Hanover County, Onslow, Brunswick, Pender, we're able to clear debris, but only as the floodwaters are allowing it. So the areas that we have access, we're successfully getting the debris out of the roadway, but we're still struggling with getting access to all areas of those counties. And that's the same in Columbus and Robeson County as well. We did have one additional closure overnight of significance, and that's US 221 in Ashe County. It wasn't a mudslide or a rock slide. It was a slope failure. Due to the heavy rains, that is closed, and we'll be able to let the citizens know how fast we can get that open. We are looking at potential new closures based on high water. We're working conditions, especially on Cottle Creek on I-85 in the vicinity of China Grove, which may flood in the coming days, as well as sections of US 74 from Charlotte to Rockingham. There's probably 10 or 11 different creek crossings that, based on the flood conditions and projections, we anticipate those may flood as well, so we're working detours on those significant routes. That concludes my update. Thank you.
Now I will add, and I know the Secretary will agree, we do not want evacuees to go back.
Yes,
we do not want that to happen right now. There's too much going on. Colonel Glenn McNeil.
Thank you, Governor. Glenn McNeil, Commander of the North Carolina State Highway Patrol. The State Highway Patrol continues to activate and deploy members into the affected areas to assist with the local response efforts. As stated, roadways are not getting better, and in some cases are worsening as the rain bands that occurred overnight are raising water levels in already flooded areas. As Governor Cooper stated previously and gave a long list of safety precautions, please, under no circumstances, should you drive around closed and barricaded roadways. The loss of life is unnecessary and preventable, so please do not cross running water, standing water, or barricade closures. You're putting yourselves in harm's way and also the first responders who are coming to attempt the rescues. The media, thank you for helping us get that strong public safety message out. Just because the storm is moving out in your area, hazardous conditions still will continue for days to come. We continue to work with our excellent DOT partners, monitoring I-95, I-40, and also our U.S. routes that serve as primary thoroughfares to bring help and supplies into the affected areas. Overnight, our troopers responded to 99 collisions and 207 calls for service, which primarily involve road closures due to downed trees and flooded roadways. We'll ask if you have to travel. Before doing so, visit your local media and also visit drivenc.gov before you travel so that you have the most up-to-date travel information. This concludes my brief. Thank you.
Dr. Mandy Cohen.
Thank you, Governor. Mandy Cohen, Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. And as you know, we're doing everything we can to help the people impacted by Hurricane Florence. And we know that folks are feeling effects right now and will for many weeks and months ahead. So one of the things we are working on at the department is providing as much flexibility in our programs that help our citizens here in North Carolina as much as we can. So the first we're announcing today is some flexibility that our department is implementing in coordination with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. These flexibilities are around the programs for food and nutrition services. These are going to help everyone in the state. They're statewide temporary flexibilities that apply to all 100 counties and the more than 600,000 households who are enrolled in the food and nutrition support programs. So beginning today, North Carolinians will be able to purchase hot food, including food prepared for immediate consumption from authorized electronic benefit transfer realtors using their EBT cards. All authorized EBT vendors in the state have been notified of this change, and this change is effective until the end of October. This is going to help families who are not able to prepare food at home due to displacement or to power outages, but we want them to still have access to warm meals. Customers should inquire first with the store to make sure that they can process hot food purchases, but this is a good step forward that folks can right now go to those vendors and get hot food. Second, we continue to work on making sure our medical shelters across the state are set up and supported. We had a fourth medical shelter set up and opened in Charlotte yesterday. All 4 of those shelters across the state have bed availability. The other 3 are in Goldsboro, Clayton, and High Point. If someone needs to go to a medical shelter, continue to work with local emergency management for those referrals. We also continue to stay in close contact with hospitals and other healthcare facilities throughout the state regarding their capabilities and their needs related to staffing or power, food, water, and supplies. We know folks are stretched. They're doing everything they can to meet the needs of their community, and they've been staying in good contact with local emergency management officials when they have issues, and we continue to gather that information and respond to those needs. Next, we're also established a disaster distress hotline for anyone needing crisis counseling or experiencing emotional distress related to the hurricane. The distress helpline is 1-800-985-5990. It is a 24/7 hotline dedicated for crisis counseling for people experiencing emotional distress. Again, that's 1-800-985-5990. There's additional information on the Department of Health and Human Services website or the Hurricane Florence webpage. And then lastly, I have to reiterate the message you continue to hear from the governor and the other colleagues standing with me. Please do not drive through standing water or moving water. Your life is at risk. Please turn around, don't drown. In addition, make sure that if there's flooding near your home, make sure you're not plugging in electrical devices. We don't want to see anyone electrocuted. We also make sure not to be using your gas-powered generators or outdoor grills inside your home due to carbon monoxide poisoning. And again, those foods that may have come into contact with flood or storm water, or if you've been without power and now those foods have not been refrigerated properly, please dispose of them. When in doubt, throw it out. We don't want to see any more people be impacted by the storm than absolutely necessary. Please be safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Cohen. Mr. Albie Lewis.
Thank you, Governor. I'm Albie Lewis, Federal Coordinating Officer with FEMA. From the start, we have had 2 incident management assistance teams working directly with the North Carolina Emergency Operations Center, conducting logistics, operations, and planning. Currently, we have well over 350 folks right in the Raleigh-Durham area working in support of the state. And we have approximately 2,000, not only in the state, but spread back to Atlanta and up to Washington, D.C. in support of operations. Last night, we assisted and pushed forward an additional 85 ambulances for patient evacuation and movement from facilities. We are also supporting pharmacy support for the ambulance fleet. We are coordinating medical providers for those shelter operations in Charlotte. Currently, we have 5 health and medical task forces, 2 rapid deployment forces who are providing support to all the medical needs in central and eastern branches. Mr. Sprayberry talked about the urban search and rescue teams. Many of those came through the EMAC. We are also providing an additional 800 federal urban search and rescue personnel who are deployed here in North Carolina with swift water rescue capabilities to augment those local fire support facilities and teams, and they've supported over 700 rescues. We have 4 disaster medical assistance teams and 3 national veterinary response teams, and they're staged in the Western and Central Branch to prepare for those additional impacts. We have 5 pharmacists supporting the pharmacy cache and staging in preparation for post-storm public health requirements. And then finally, our United States Army Corps of Engineers is supporting power restoration and conducting assessments on critical infrastructure to provide generator support where needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Albie. We're getting a lot of calls that people want to help. There are a lot of wonderful charities that are helping. You can also contribute to the North Carolina Disaster Relief Fund at governor.nc.gov. We have a number of experts here who are working as part of this team in the disaster response, and we will be glad to answer your questions.
Governor Gary Robertson with AP. We talked a couple of days ago about how you would sum this up and compared to other North Carolina storms, but now as we're seemingly on day 5 or 6 of the storms, you start thinking about, are these storms like the monumental storms we hear in other parts of the country? We've heard about, we remember Andrew, we remember Katrina, we remember here in North Carolina Hazel. I mean, based on what you've seen and the life loss and the damage, how would you square those up with these other monumental storms?
This is an epic storm that is still continuing because the rivers are rising in certain parts of our state. Some areas have not seen the worst flooding yet. So this is a monumental disaster for our state that affects many of our counties, many of our people. We're going to be going through an assessment here over the weeks and months to be able to quantify the magnitude. But already we have 17 people who have died. We hope there are not more. We hope there's not another life lost. But we know that raging rivers are still out there and more lives can be claimed. We're going to work hard.
Governor Cooper, Dewan Hogard with WTVB. Of those 17 that have died, does that include the one from Union County regarding the toddler? And then also President Trump coming to the state. Have you all connected yet? And do you plan to accompany him on his trip?
First, I think, number one, the answer is yes, that it does include the toddler tragically died in Union County. I know our office has been in touch with the President's office, and they are working on some arrangements for that. We're going to have a number of federal officials visiting us, including FEMA Administrator Brock Long and Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, and I'm sure there will likely be others as well. Yes.
Hi, Governor. Debbie Elliott with NPR. As you've been coping with this crisis, are you gaining any insight into, how you live with water in this state, and are you thinking about planning for that, and also just the public resources needed to cope with something like this?
We are going to have to be smart about our recovery and about our long-range planning. When you have 2 500-year floods within 2 years of each other, it's pretty clear it's not a 500-year flood. So as we approach recovery, both short-term and long-term, we will have to look at flooded property, work on mitigation and buyouts, and being smart about how we recover and make sure that we're involving local, state, and federal officials. We're going to need significant resources to recover. There's no question about that. People need help immediately. So I will just tell you this, that is certainly kept in my mind, but our immediate concern is pulling people out of the water, keeping them safe, and dealing with the short-term emergency needs that people have.
Travis Van with WRL. Can you give us some details about how you're able to get in and out of Wilmington? What went into that? Is it just high axle trucks that can get in and out right now?
So either Mike or Jim. Which one of you guys? Okay.
Yes, sir. We have one limited route into Wilmington, and it is clear. So our DOT crews, supporting elements, are all using that route. But it is one route that, based on what's going to happen over the next few days, we don't have a 100% degree of confidence that we can sustain it. So it is open today, and we're pushing supplies as hard as we possibly can with the plan that it may not sustain us over the next week.
Can you tell us how you opened it? Did you have to do some construction? Or?
No, it was all high water going down and debris getting out of that road. So a combination of getting the trees cut, utility crews helping us get the power lines out, and then getting and letting the water get down below the pavement level.
And you're able to get normal vehicles through there, or just
all of our vehicles can go.
I'll emphasize again, this is another point why we don't need evacuees going back. We've got one limited route into Wilmington, and it's being used for supplies and necessary emergency material and utility workers and law enforcement, and we don't need people going back right now, particularly when this route may disappear tonight. Yes.
I'm sorry, this isn't my question, but just a follow-up is, are you telling us that that limits a route if a regular driver came up there, that they would be turned away? I just want to understand how limited access.
Yes. So we're pushing hundreds, if not thousands, of vehicles. So those have priority. However, we're not. The route is not closed, but we're just discouraging, unless you're a first responder or you have dire reason to get to Wilmington, please wait.
I wonder if I asked Mike something regarding transitional housing. We know that there are, hotels, and there's a lot of rural areas that don't have hotels, and those where a lot of people are going to be struggling. What are you going to, have you thought about and provide any details about what you're going to do with people who are in rural areas, but there really isn't enough hotel space to set them up for weeks?
Right. So there's also other programs where the disaster survivor can actually move back into their house and begin to do some minor repairs that will be covered. And we're looking into the possibility of maybe getting some travel trailers too.
Travis with WRL. Can you speak to dam breaches that we've seen and others that we're monitoring, particularly if there's some sort of imminent danger to people who have not evacuated?
Okay, again, that was North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper in his press conference with Emergency Management. Now, and Bill Cosby's wife wants a Pennsylvania ethics board to investigate the judge set to sentence her husband next week on felony sex assault charges. Camille Cosby is renewing allegations that trial judge Stephen O'Neill had a grudge with a key witness in a pretrial hearing. O'Neill sent the case to trial afterward, and Cosby was convicted this spring. A family spokesman says Camille Cosby will be in Harrisburg to file a complaint Monday with the State Judicial Conduct Board. Defense lawyers have filed a similar motion in Montgomery County Court, asking O'Neill to step down. Cosby faces up to 10 years in prison or more at the September 24th sentencing. The Cosbys say they've hired a former FBI agent to investigate the alleged feud between O'Neill and witness Bruce Castor, a former prosecutor who declined to prosecute Cosby a decade earlier. Before we end today's Fox 29 News Now, here is a look at your weather for the week. Thank you for watching Fox 29 News Now. You can join us tomorrow at the same time, 10 a.m. I'm Carrie McGuire. Thank you for watching.